4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up between now and 4 p.m. Well, PMQs is back and Boris Johnson was under scrutiny over that apology yesterday in the Commons. The Labour leader claiming it was mealy-mouthed. What did you think? It all comes as the Prime Minister set to leave for India this afternoon. Promises to be a difficult trip for the Prime Minister, as India, of course, has stayed out of the war altogether. Can the Prime Minister change President Narendra Modi's mind? Also, we'll be in Ukraine. We'll be crossing over to Dnipro in the Donbass region, where Russian attacks are increasing by the hour. The latest of what's happening on the ground. And we'll be discussing the online harms bill, which had a second reading in Parliament yesterday. Is it a protective measure or an attack on free speech? That and so much more. So do get in touch. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. All that now between, 3 and 4 o'clock. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The Labour leader has accused the Prime Minister of sending the Conservative Party into disarray after the Prime Minister broke coronavirus lockdown rules. At Prime Minister's question, Sir Keir Starmer said the party of Churchill has been reduced to shouting and screaming in defence of a lawbreaker and has called on him to resign. Boris Johnson hit back, reiterating his apology for breaching COVID rules by attending that birthday party in the Cabinet Office during lockdown.
Professor Neil Ferguson broke the rules. He also resigned. The Prime Minister said that was the right thing to do. The former Health Secretary broke the rules. He too resigned. The Prime Minister tried to claim he sacked him. Why does the Prime Minister think everybody else's actions have consequences except his own?
I thank the right honourable gentleman. I feel he's in some kind of Doctor Who time warp. We had this conversation yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I've explained why I bitterly regret receiving an FPN. I apologise to the House, but he asks about the actions for which I take responsibility, and I'll tell him we're going to get on with delivering for the British people.
More than 5 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia launched its attack. That's according to the UN Refugee Agency. Well, meanwhile, Russia has again ordered for Ukrainian and foreign fighters to surrender at the steel plant in the besieged city of Mariupol. But Ukrainian commanders have vowed not to give up the final stronghold in the city. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says they've reached a preliminary agreement with Russia to open up a humanitarian corridor for the first time now in 3 days. More than 2,000 people have been pulled from small boats in the Channel in the first 3 weeks of April. UK authorities intercepted 263 people yesterday who were spotted on board 7 small boats. So far this year, almost 7,000 people have crossed the channel. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is a step closer to being extradited to the US today after magistrates issued an order for him to face espionage charges. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is now responsible for deciding whether to approve the extradition. The 50-year-old is wanted in America over alleged conspiracies to obtain and disclose national defence information. He denies the allegations. A man's been given a suspended sentence after admitting to sending a grossly offensive video of a model of Grenfell Tower being burned. Paul Bassetti pleaded guilty at Westminster Magistrates Court to filming the footage at a bonfire party in November 2018 and then sharing it within WhatsApp groups. He's received a 10-week jail sentence, suspended for 2 years. Prince Harry may not return to the UK for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Speaking to NBC News Today programme, the Duke of Sussex said security issues and everything else may keep him away. Harry and his wife Meghan had tea with the Queen on their way to the Invictus Games last week. He told the programme he'd wanted to make sure Her Majesty was protected.
It's just so nice to see her. You know, she's on great form. She's always got a great sense of humour with me, and I'm just making sure that she's, you know, protected and got the right people around.
Well, you make her laugh. That's what she always says. Did you do it again?
Yes, I did. Both Meghan and I had tea with her, so it was really nice to catch up with her. And you know, home for me now is you know, for the time being, it's in the States.
The full interview will air later today on NBC News Today programme. Now, a man's been jailed after reaching speeds of up to 150 miles per hour during an 80-mile pursuit. Video footage has been released showing a banned driver in a police pursuit stretching from Bedfordshire to the West Midlands. 25-year-old Saeed Reza has been jailed for 4 years and 2 months. Users of self-driving cars could legally be allowed to watch TV and films behind the wheel under proposed changes to the Highway Code. The Department for Transport says the new laws would make insurance companies rather than individuals liable for accidents while the self-driving vehicle is in control. The updated code will make it clear that drivers must be ready to take back control of vehicles when needed. You're up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Darren.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. It is 6 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. It's been a pretty frantic day at Westminster today. A return, of course, after 2.5 weeks on reset meant that the parliamentary schedule was pretty busy. We've heard from the Home Secretary taking questions from MPs on the government's new proposals to send illegal channel migrants to Rwanda for processing. This was then followed by the Prime Minister, who faced PMQs for the first time since he was fined by the Met Police. We offered his sincere apologies and said he'd accepted the findings by the Met. And, of course, in the last few hours, we'd had PMQs with the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, branded the Prime Minister a liar and said that the apology which he'd offered to Parliament yesterday was insincere. The Prime Minister is leaving for India later on this afternoon on a charm offensive for a trade deal. But will it be an awkward visit? Because, of course, the Indian Prime Minister Modi has refused to condemn the Russian leader Vladimir Putin for the invasion of Ukraine. So pretty busy all round. Let's bring in Tom Hunt. He is the MP for Ipswich, Conservative MP, and joins us now from Parliament. Tom, very good afternoon to you. Let's just first of all start, actually, if we can, with India, because that's where we've ended up. We know that where the Prime Minister is going to this afternoon. Is it your hope that somehow he might be able to change Narendra Modi's thoughts on all of this, to take a stronger line on Russia? India is the world's largest democracy, a close ally of the UK, but in the end, it's failing to back Ukraine.
That is true. I know that India has its own relationship with Russia, which has been quite a close relationship over many decades. Something I'm not sure everybody's aware with. However, you know, on an issue as black and white as a Russia-Ukraine issue, I mean, it is disappointing that India, as the world's largest democracy, haven't taken a robust stand against Russia. So hopefully the Prime Minister can discuss that with President Modi and they can get to a more common place where they see. But whether that happens or not, I don't know. I hope it does. But clearly, India is a huge economy where we have ambitions of striking a comprehensive, ambitious trade agreement, and I wish the Prime Minister well in that endeavour.
Let's move on to BMQs. I'm sure you were there or either saw, but let's just remind viewers of the to and fro, the quite spicy BMQs earlier on today, not least of all the exchange between Sir Keir Starmer and the Prime Minister.
Why did the Prime Minister's press secretary, Allegra Stratton, have to resign from her job?
Minister. Sorry. I bitterly regret Allegra's resignation. I think it was very sad, and I think she did an outstanding job. But I do, particularly since she was the one who coined the expression coal, cars, cash and trees, which enabled the UK to deliver a fantastic COP26 summit last year.
Here's Starmer.
Allegra Strachan laughed at breaking the rules. She resigned. The Prime Minister then claimed he was furious at her behaviour and accepted her resignation. Professor Neil Ferguson broke the rules. He also resigned. The Prime Minister said that was the right thing to do. The former Health Secretary broke the rules. He too resigned. The Prime Minister tried to claim he sacked him. Why does the Prime Minister think everybody else's actions have consequences except his own?
I thank the right honourable gentleman. I feel he's in some kind of Doctor Who time warp. We had this conversation yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I've explained why I bitterly regret receiving an FPN. I apologise to the House, but he asks about the actions for which I take responsibility, and I'll tell him we're going to get on with delivering for the British people, making sure that we power out of the problems that COVID has left us, and more people in work than there were before the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, fixing our energy problems and leading the world in standing up to the aggression of Vladimir Putin.
There you go, that was PMQs a little earlier. Tom, there's a big vote tomorrow, isn't there, on whether the Prime Minister should be referred to the Privileges Committee about whether he misled Parliament or not. Is that a motion that you would back?
I won't be backing a motion to refer this issue to Chris Bryant's committee. That is not something I'll be doing. I think we had a statement on it yesterday. There'll be a debate on it tomorrow connected with this motion, but to be perfectly honest with you, I'm really keen that the government is focused on, and actually the House of Commons is focused on, the array of huge challenges that are in front of us at the moment to do with cost of living, Ukraine, and other things like, for example, making sure the Rwanda policy works. And I think we've debated this issue into a blue in the face. A lot of things happened, and it's clearly not a good situation, but frankly it is not a resigning matter in my view, and I want the Prime Minister to be dedicated and focused to those key issues that matter most to my constituents, and that is what he's doing.
I mean, it would, of course, I think even the Prime Minister would accept be a resigning matter if it was proved that he deliberately misled Parliament. And so in those circumstances, why not refer himself? Why not just let this investigation happen? Because, as the Prime Minister's critics might suggest, if he doesn't, there seems to be something he wants to hide.
Well, look, I mean, I think that having a sort of some sort of investigation that will go on for months and months and months, led by a committee chaired by a Labour member of Parliament who's been incredibly political throughout his career, I think would not be the right thing to do. I think it's better to, the Prime Minister has said that he didn't deliberately break the COVID rules, and in his mind he hadn't broken the COVID rules. So there is no evidence to suggest that he misled Parliament. I think we know that. I don't see how an investigation by this committee is. I mean, with greatest of respect, Chris Bryant, in terms of his time being chair of the committee that he's chair, I've got there's no suggestion from me that he hasn't done an adequate job as chair of that committee, but I really don't know what is to be gained by having a dragged out investigation by his committee, which how's it ever going to be able to prove that the Prime Minister deliberately misled Parliament? It's going to be something which is impossible to improve, because the Prime Minister said to us that he didn't deliberately break the COVID rules. In his own mind, he hadn't broken the COVID rules. So how is an investigation by Chris Bryant's committee going to get to a firm conclusion either way? It's not.
Yep.
So it's a waste of time.
OK, I mean, I should just say, you possibly haven't seen this. In the last 20 minutes or so, Chris Bryant has written a letter to the Committee of Privileges saying that he would recuse himself if the committee was to look into this, i.e. he would not be chairing that investigation. But we'll see what happens with that vote tomorrow. Tom, I just want to ask you one last question before we let you go on the Archbishop of Canterbury. It also came up at PMQs today, but you were quite vocal at the weekend, weren't you, in regards to what Justin Welby had to say with the Rwanda immigrant policy. He branded it ungodly. Why do you think he wasn't allowed to speak out?
Well, I didn't say that he shouldn't be allowed to speak out. I wasn't trying to cancel the Archbishop of Canterbury, but I was exercising my right of free speech to say that I think his intervention was wrong-headed. I don't think he was right with what he said. And to be perfectly honest, I think choosing Easter Sunday to shine a spotlight on that in the way that he did, I personally didn't think was advisable. I'm not saying that he should be banned from saying what he wants to say, but I'm just saying I didn't agree, and personally I don't think it was advisable for him to have done it. So, and I think he was wrong. I don't think he really understands the issue. I think that yes, he's not a kind of government department, so he can say, well, I shouldn't be expected to come up with an alternative plan. But I think it would be good if he showed some basic understanding as to what the alternative might be, because it's all well and good saying this isn't a good thing, but it's also not a good thing what's happening at the moment. People dying in the English Channel, and a system that benefits people smugglers more than anybody else who are making money from people trying to get into our country illegally. I don't think that it was that the Archbishop of Canterbury was right with what he said. It's not the first time he's intervened in political matters, and he tends to do so very much from one side of the argument. On Brexit, he got involved in Brexit when he shouldn't have done, in my view. But me saying that I don't think he should, or I wouldn't advise him to say what he says, is a different thing from trying to cancel. He'll continue to say what he says, and if he keeps on saying the same sort of things, I'll probably continue to disagree with him.
And then in many ways, it's the essence of democracy, isn't it, as well? Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. Tom Harwood there joining us from Parliament. We're going to be speaking to the Liberal Democrat MP Alistair Carmichael in a moment. But let's see a bit more of the exchanges between the Prime Minister and Sir Keir Starmer at PMQs a little earlier.
Speaker, yesterday's apology lasted for as long as the Prime Minister thought necessary to be clipped for the news. But once the cameras were off, the Prime Minister went to see his backbenchers, and he was back to blaming everyone else. He even said that the Archbishop of Canterbury had not been critical enough of Putin. In fact, the Archbishop called Putin's war an act of great evil, and the Church of England has led the way in providing refuge to those fleeing. Would the Prime Minister like to take this opportunity to apologise for slandering the Archbishop and the Church of England?
Mr. Speaker, I think the right honourable gentleman. I was slightly taken aback to be Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I was slightly taken aback for the government to be criticised over the policy that we have devised to end the deaths at sea in the Channel as a result of cruel criminal gangs. I was surprised that we were attacked for that. And actually, Mr. Speaker, it turns out that policy. Do you know who proposed that policy? First of all, in 2004, it was David Blunkett, Mr. Speaker, who said it was a 21st, yes it was, and she'll remember, a 21st century solution to the problems of illegal asylum seeking and immigration. He should stick with, he's a Corbynister in a smart Islington suit. That's the truth.
There we go. Let's speak to the Liberal Democrat MP for Orkney and Shetland, Alistair Carmichael, who joined us. Alistair, thank you very much indeed for joining us in Parliament this afternoon. First of all, I mean, just on this idea about the Rwandan migrants, coming back to that again, because that's what reference was to the Archbishop of Canterbury. I mean, it is fair to say that it does seem that public opinion largely is on the side with the government on this in attempting to deal with it.
Well, I see one opinion poll published this morning that says that the government on a whole range of issues has negative ratings, and on their management of immigration, actually, their rating is minus 57%. So I'm afraid, Darren, I don't really share your confidence that the public are on the side of the government in this. The point of the fact is, though, that when it comes to this Rwanda scheme that Priti Patel has come up with, she is claiming that it will have a deterrent effect. Now, she confirmed to me yesterday in the House of Commons that the number of people who will be going to Rwanda, which is the capacity that Rwanda has to take, will be a few hundred a year, possibly a few thousand over a 5-year period. If you remember that there were 28,500 people who made the Channel crossing last year, it's difficult to see just where that deterrent effect is actually going to come from, even if this were a compassionate or a workable system, and we all know that it isn't.
What would the Liberal Democrats' solution be? I think we can all agree, can't we, clearly, that people shouldn't be putting their lives at risk crossing the Channel, that we do need to clamp down on these criminal gangs. What would you do instead?
We would set up safe and legal routes in regions where they were needed. We've shown in Afghanistan, we've shown in Ukraine that we can do this. I just don't understand why the government thinks that they should pick and choose the places where they will take refugees from in that place. We have international obligations to take refugees. We should be working with other people. We should be setting limits with other people in the number of people that we would take. We can do that if we set up safe and legal routes. And that is the way to stop the people traffickers. You know, in the same way that the Americans were able to end bootlegging of alcohol by ending prohibition, you will only ever end the people trafficking if you are able to end the illegality and to offer a legal route for people who need to come here.
But wouldn't you accept that lots of the people turning up at the Channel are not asylum seekers, they are economic migrants? And in the end, also...
Sorry, Dan, we've had this discussion. In fact, we had it last week. And you will recall that last week I told you, and nobody has ever contradicted me in this because it's government's figures, that 98% of those who make that Channel crossing go on to make applications for asylum, and that the overwhelming majority of these applications are then granted. Now, you know, I think people like yourself have to explain why it is that you continue to peddle misinformation about people who are coming here as genuine refugees. We have a system in place which will weed out anybody who's not a genuine refugee, but the overwhelming majority of people who make that crossing are.
But what would you say, though, to people who say, well, you know, frankly, under your scheme, the number of people applying for asylum would increase quite dramatically? And again, that's something the public just don't want. They don't want to see tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers arriving in Britain every year.
I would say listen to what we're saying, because in fact safe and legal routes would probably in fact lead to a reduction of the number of people who were coming, because you would have a safe and legal route and it would be a managed process. At the moment, you have seen the number of people going through the Channel route rise exponentially because everything that the government does simply fails. And it is the working definition of insanity that you keep trying the same thing time and time again and hoping for a different result. You're not going to get a different result. And you know, you saw earlier this week, or rather last week, when the Prime Minister announced the Rwanda scheme, that in fact he flatly contradicted Priti Patel, who had previously been saying that the Royal Navy and others would be pushing back these boats in the Channel. That was unworkable. This is unworkable. It's time for the government to stop chasing headlines here, and it's time for news outlets to stop peddling misinformation about refugees and get on to manage a way of giving help to those who need it most. That is how we've always done things in this country. That is the British way in the past, and I think it should still be the British way today.
OK, I'm just looking at a full fact thing here, which refers to the Refugee Council, who says that between January 2020 and June 2021, 61% of initial asylum decisions would have resulted in refugee protection. Clearly, there might be disagreement over the numbers, but you're right in saying that the majority...
There would have been a substantial number more then granted in appeals, because the other problem with the system as it's currently administered by Priti Patel is that the standard of decision-making is exceptionally poor, and it is exceptionally inefficient. It takes far too long to get decisions in the first place. If Priti Patel would give her efforts to getting the system right, then in fact I think you would find that there would be a lot more public confidence in it, and you wouldn't need gimmicks of this sort.
OK, as always, appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Alistair. Alistair Carmichael from Parliament this afternoon. OK, we're going to pause there on the briefing on GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes' time, we're going to be talking about Ukraine, the situation on the ground there as the Russian forces pile into the Donbass region. But before all of that, let's bring you up to date with the afternoon weather, and it's pretty glorious in most places today.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your GB News weather forecast, and for the next few days it's looking mainly dry. There will be some spells of warm sunshine at times, but cooler along those eastern coasts. Now, the reason for that is high pressure still very much in charge of our weather through the rest of Wednesday and into Thursday. But the high does start to drift its way to the north of the UK, so it will allow things to turn a little bit cooler with easterly winds beginning to set in. But through the rest of Wednesday, through Wednesday evening, we'll see plenty of clear skies across the UK. A little bit of fair weather cloud from time to time, but that high pressure keeps those weather fronts away, so it stays dry for the most part. Now, through the course of the night, we will perhaps see a little bit of low cloud drifting in across eastern Scotland. Temperatures here dropping down close to freezing in places, so there could be a touch of frost as well. But for most places, it should just about be frost-free, but it will be a chilly but bright start to Thursday. Now, Thursday itself, another fair day for most places, apart from along some of those North Sea coasts where we will see this low cloud persisting. So for the likes of Newcastle and other coastal areas, where we'll see temperatures pegged back at just 11 or 12 degrees. But you don't have to come too far inland and further west, and we'll see highs of 17 or 18 degrees. A little bit more cloud, though, through the afternoon for Wales and the southwest of England. Now, more low cloud drifts in from the North Sea through Thursday night and into Friday, and we start to see those easterly winds becoming a little stronger. So by Friday morning, a lot more cloud around, and some of that cloud could just be thick enough to give the odd light spot of rain further south. But our overnight temperatures won't be quite so low, with that blanket of cloud keeping things a little bit warmer. Through Friday then, it's a grey start for some places, but we will see some sunshine through the day. Best of the sunshine likely to be for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland and the north and west of England and Wales. But further south, where we've got more cloud, we could see one or two spots of rain. And it stays fairly cloudy with the further risk of showers into the weekend across the south. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Very welcome back to GB News. It is coming up to 3:30 on this Wednesday afternoon. Lots of you have been getting in touch. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Jackie says the public are no longer interested in this Partygate bore. The government and the Conservative voters should look at it in a positive light. It's interesting how much effort a failing Labour leader and a parasitic SNP are prepared to put into dislodging a vote's winning Prime Minister. Richard says, why haven't you mentioned the fact that Starmer has misled Parliament? He's been investigated for his incorrect statement about Johnson berating BBC journalists. Clive says, why is GB News following the agenda of the media herd and the Met and keeping cake gates, as he puts it, at the top of the news? For months, I have turned over from the BBC to GB News to get proper news. Now I'm just getting the mainstream media agenda. And Andy says, Boris refuses to publish the Grey Report. He's blatantly refused to allow independent parliamentary committees to investigate. The police have found him guilty, which means what he said cannot be true. Boris has lied to Parliament, which is automatically a resigning matter. Why does he not resign? Do get in touch, GB Views at gbnews.uk. A cross range of views we want to hear on the channel. OK, coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking about the local elections. We're going to be talking about Ukraine, also about the online harms bill. Busy back half to this programme, but first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news and Rosie again.
Thanks, Darren. Let's get you up to date at 3:30. The Labour leader has accused the Prime Minister of sending the Conservative Party into disarray after Boris Johnson broke coronavirus lockdown rules. At Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer said the party of Churchill has been reduced to shouting and screaming in defence of a lawbreaker and called on the Prime Minister to resign. But Boris Johnson hit back, reiterating his apology for breaching COVID rules by attending a party in the Cabinet Office during lockdown. More than 5 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia launched its attack. That's according to the UN Refugee Agency. Well, meanwhile, Russia issued another deadline for Ukrainian and foreign fighters to surrender at a steel plant in the besieged city of Mariupol. But Ukrainian commanders have vowed not to give up the final stronghold in the city. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says they've reached a preliminary agreement with Russia to open a humanitarian corridor for the first time in 3 days. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is one step closer to being extradited to the US after magistrates issued an order for him to face espionage charges. The Home Secretary Priti Patel is now responsible for deciding whether to approve the extradition. The 50-year-old is wanted in America over an alleged conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defence information. He denies the allegations. More than 2,000 people have been pulled from small boats in the Channel in the first 3 weeks of April. UK authorities intercepted 263 people yesterday who were spotted on board 7 small boats. You're up to date. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Let's now head back to Darren.
Thanks, Rosie. Let's turn to Ukraine now, because according to European officials, Russia's deployed up to 20,000 mercenaries from Syria, Libya and elsewhere in its new offensive in Ukraine's Donbass region, sent into battle with no heavy equipment or armoured vehicles. The official estimate said the estimates of the mercenary involvement on the ground in eastern Ukraine ranged from 10 to 20,000, and it was hard to break down that figure between, as I say, Syrians, Libyans and other fighters recruited by the Wagner Group. It comes as Russia's top security official said earlier today that Russia was trying to break through the Ukrainian defensive positions throughout Ukraine's east. Well, joining me now from Dnipro in the Donbass region is the research director of the European Expert Association, a Ukrainian think tank, and that is Maria Adiva. Maria, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Just give us a sense of this great attempt by the Russians, if you like, to try and overwhelm the Donbass region. There seems to be little doubt that tens of thousands of troops are now starting a new offensive.
Yeah, President Zelensky said yesterday that the new battle for Donbass has started, and that means that Russian troops with all their capabilities will try to get control over as much territories of the Lugansk and Donetsk regions as possible. And that means that Ukraine will have a very tough weeks, because Ukrainian troops will be fighting fiercely. But on the other hand, we understand that Russian troops will try to take as much advantage and to try to push as hard as possible. Because you know that on the 9th of May, Russian troops and the President Putin are celebrating the Victory Day. And since 1999, Putin on the Red Square is having this large military parade where he has to say something about the victory. And this war showed us that the Russian military are stalled on their position. They cannot actually get any goals that they have previously put for them. They have withdrawn troops from the north of Ukraine, and that means that they will be very active here on the east. And the other direction might be Kharkiv itself, because today the advisor to the President Zelensky, Mr. Podolyak, announced that there might be not only battle for Donbass, but also battle for Kharkiv, the second largest city of Ukraine, very close to the border with Russia. And Russian troops are now approaching to Donbass through Kharkiv, very close to Kharkiv. They have not put Kharkiv as a primarily target, but they might do so in the upcoming weeks.
But there is a sense, isn't there, that Ukrainians are well dug in the Donbass region, but also that there have been some counterattacks as well from Ukrainian forces.
Exactly so, and in the Kharkiv region as well. So the main battle now goes on around the city of Izum and the nearby smaller towns. And the Ukrainian troops have successfully counterattacked there and liberated several towns. And actually, I have been to several of them, and we see there, as well as in Bucha and Irpin, the evidences of war crimes committed by Russian troops there. Because after they have control over some small or large city, they immediately cut off every kind of communication, so that people will not be able to give out any information, and they start committing these atrocities, which we see when these towns are liberated. So, but Ukrainian troops are really advancing, and yesterday a column of Russian tanks was destroyed that was approaching from Izum in the direction of Kharkiv, and every day we have news that another fighter jet or helicopter will be put down by Ukrainian armed forces. So Ukrainian army is holding very tightly on their positions, and they will stand there for the last. No one will surrender, because people here in Ukraine are protecting their own land and their own families and children. But on the other hand, we see that Russia is taking additional resources, regrouping, and will attack even harder here in Donbass and in the east of Ukraine.
And just very finally, Maria, this is the situation in Mariupol. It is very desperate. We know that there are potentially up to 100,000 civilians still trapped in that city. Tens of thousands of people, we believe, have died, and there are still Ukrainian fighters determined to fight on there. But there is little doubt that Mariupol has been devastated.
Yes, exactly. So that the situation there is awful, and we today also get the news from the defenders of Mariupol that there are still many civilians that are under the buildings that were destroyed and under the rubble that need to be evacuated and need to be just got out of there. And we know that the evacuation convoy was set for today to get people out of Mariupol. We don't know yet if it was successful, because Russia numerous times has deliberately targeted this convoy, so they will not be able to get people out of there. And also and other smaller towns here on the east, like Popasna and others, people are evacuated from there because they are advised to do so in this threat of the Russian advance, so that the situation in Mariupol will not repeat itself here in the east of Ukraine. And Ukrainian forces are trying to get to evacuate as much people as possible, so they will not be trapped if Russian troops advance more here in this territory. But of course, Mariupol is something that the world will shudder after we will see what has happened with the city, which was before the war 500,000 city on the southeast of Ukraine.
Yeah, very upsetting stuff indeed. Maria, thank you very much, as always, for joining us. Maria Diva there, joining us from Dnipro in the centre of Ukraine. Well, let's stick with this subject now, because the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is facing growing frustration from within his own country as well as from abroad over what critics say is his lack of leadership on Ukraine. Scholz said yesterday that Germany had practically maxed out its weapons it can deliver from its own stocks, and is instead working with the armaments industry and other nations to send more support to the country militarily. It came as the leaders of the United States, Britain and Canada pledged to send more artillery weaponry to Ukraine in the face of that all-out assault that we've just heard about. Well, joining me now is the German correspondent, Thomas Sparrow from Berlin. Thomas, thank you. We've had a bit of a about turn, haven't we, from Olaf Scholz? He showed a lot of steel and about turnery, if you like, at the start of this war. But lots of, even his own supporters are starting to question what's happened to him in recent days. He made a speech, I heard, in the last 24 hours in which he effectively said nothing.
Yes, Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, has been under increasing criticism here in Germany and also, by the way, internationally for his stance. It is the case that Germany changed course at the beginning of the war and decided to send weapons to Ukraine. Germany had previously a policy of not sending weapons to conflict zones, and that was something that changed. But pressure has been growing since for Germany to do even more. Germany, as Europe's powerhouse, as one of the EU's most important countries, obviously many expecting German leadership in that particular case. But Olaf Scholz in particular, but also his government, they have been very reluctant, if you will, to send heavy weapons to Ukraine. And like other countries that have decided to do so, there are different reasons to explain that. One, that the Bundeswehr does not have enough material of its own in its own stocks, that according to Olaf Scholz, or that Ukrainian people would need training if Germany decided to send some of its equipment. So those are arguments that have been used by German officials here. But, and that it's an important caveat, there have been plenty of politicians, both internally but also internationally, saying that Germany should lead by example and should also send heavy weapons to Ukraine, something that Ukrainian officials have said they desperately need.
And this does, to a degree, seem to be much more of a long-standing problem, in the sense that Germany has not been spending enough money on weaponry, isn't it? Do you think people have been too harsh towards Olaf Scholz, that many of these problems simply aren't of his own making?
So yes, it is the case that the German Bundeswehr has had plenty of trouble, plenty of problems in the last few years. Lots of defense spending cuts that have basically meant that the Bundeswehr has faced all sorts of issues in the last few years, and that has led to the Bundeswehr now, according to the government, not having enough, or at least not having more possibilities of helping Ukraine when it comes to weapons. And I also agree with your comment there that to a certain extent you can criticize Olaf Scholz and his government, but on the other hand, people here are saying that it could be a bit unfair towards the government, if you will, that Germany has maybe not militarily sending weapons to Ukraine, or at least heavy weapons, but Germany has indeed helped Ukraine on a wide variety of areas, in particular financially, and Germany has stressed that they also want to do it on a long-term basis. So Germany may not be sending the heavy weapons that the Ukrainian leadership would like, but Germany is helping Ukraine in various other ways, and that's why at least part of the population here do believe that the Chancellor in particular has been treated unfairly, although on the other hand, there is a lot, as I say, a lot of criticism from those who believe that Germany should be leading much more, and that Germany should at least recognize that it needs to help Ukraine when it comes to sending those heavy weapons.
And just very finally, Thomas, where is the public mood in all of this? I'm looking at an article here from Der Spiegel saying he branded it the Scholz problem, about how discontent is growing. I was in Berlin a couple of weeks ago. You couldn't move for Ukrainian flags or the hashtag We Stand With Ukraine. It seemed to be plastered everywhere. Is there a sense that the frustration is not just amongst the politicians in and around the Bundestag, but also amongst the general population too?
Yes, there is the sense that there's growing discontent when it comes to Germany's leadership. Yet at the same time, it's also important to stress that Germany's change in the last few weeks since the war began has been accompanied by also a change in public perception. So whereas before the war, many actually were against Germany sending weapons to conflict, so when Olaf Scholz decided to do so, that was accompanied by a change in public perception by many Germans saying that they also supported it. The same, for example, with Germany's increasing its defense spending. That was something where many were reluctant before and now support. So to a large extent, the decision by the German government to move on certain areas, to change in certain areas, has been supported by the German public. But you do sense now that at least a part of the population is getting rather impatient with the government, in particular when they see all the criticism that is being leveled against the government, not only here internally by politicians, but also internationally as well.
Great stuff, as always. Thomas, thank you very much indeed. Thomas Barrow, they're joining us from Berlin. Let's move on now, because the online safety bill has had its second reading in Parliament yesterday, which the government says delivers on its manifesto commitment to make the UK the safest place in the world to be online, while at the same time balancing the defence of the freedom of expression. Some have praised the bill for its intentions as an important step towards strong independent regulation, but many others are concerned that the government is using examples of protecting children online to make far-reaching reforms, and over plans that would allow ministers to decide at their own discretion about what is legal but harmful. Well, join me to discuss all of this is Matthew Lesh. He is from the Institute of Economic Affairs and is in central London. Matthew, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You are on the side, aren't you, that you feel that this goes too far?
Look, I think that's right, Darren. I think everyone has the aspiration of making the internet a safer and more wholesome place. But I think there are some very fundamental concerns about the government's online safety bill and the way the government's going about it. Despite their assertions that this is largely about protecting children, the vast majority of the provisions will apply to all adults. We're asking firms to take automated action to remove content that could be considered unlawful, and we're expanding the definition of what is unlawful to include content that is seriously distressing. Now, that's a recipe for people making malicious claims that other people's content is hurting their feelings, and then putting impetus on firms to take down that speech or face large fines. We're also giving the government the power through the Secretary of State to assign areas of so-called legal but harmful material or content that is harmful to adults. Now, that's extremely authoritarian in nature. The fact that the government will be putting pressure on tech firms to censor what is legal speech, and that's going to include things like disinformation, things like climate denial, potentially in future under a Labour government. We really have the ability here for the government to make a limitless stream of content areas and then require firms to take action against them in their terms and conditions. So I think this is quite a frightening piece of legislation, and the government really needs to reconsider it before taking it any further through Parliament.
Do you get the sense, though, that in many ways, for right or wrong, or because people aren't as engaged in it as you are, that you're more out of step with public mood than the government on this, that the public really have a sense that protecting children online is a real priority, even at the expense of free speech?
Look, I don't think anyone's against the idea of protecting children online, particularly the removal of unlawful content from the internet. That's something, it's a goal which is universally shared. In fact, companies are taking extensive action, and some would say a little bit too much action in terms of their content moderation when it comes to removing speech. And some of that is completely acceptable and understandable. The question is, first of all, will this legislation effectively work to make the internet a safer place? And there's a lack of evidence that putting all these duties on the companies will fundamentally improve the internet. In fact, it'll make it a much worse place and less safe place. Let's take the example of the government's duties in relation to protecting children when it comes to basically treating everyone as a child by default. Now, they're going to basically say to you, companies, that they can only show you child-appropriate content. That means things that could not distress a child unless you verify your identity. In order to verify identity, you're going to have to potentially go be scanned, and they're going to have to try to determine your identity through your actions, or they're going to ask you to enter your driver's license, passport, or credit card. They're also giving the power to Ofcom to issue technology notices to companies in order to require them to use certain automated scanning technology, including potentially a private messaging, undermining encryption. Now, these are things like encryption and our privacy online, our ability to access information online, they're fundamental elements of online safety as well, and the way we use the internet. So I don't think this is a simple matter of saying, well, this is a question of safety versus freedom. I think in many ways, in the very authoritarian nature of this legislation, the powers it gives to government will make many people less safe online, not more safe.
OK, Matthew, as always, thank you very much indeed. Matthew Lesh there from the IEA joining us from Central London. Thank you. Lots have been getting in touch, by the way. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Dan says, interest how lefties all seem to be fuming about the Rwanda plan. They know it'll work. Liberal Democrats have the same view as Labour. Open door policy for all, so out of touch with the public. And Thomas says, why is Boris making this go on and on in regards to Partygate? He says, if he published the Sue Gray report, we would know the incompetent Met should have been investigated when the party bouncers, the Met Officers Guardian number 10, reported these events. So do get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Got a couple more minutes. We'll get to your views, hopefully before the end of the programme. But first, let's turn to the markets, if you like, the betting markets. We all hear about polls, don't we? And what the pollsters are saying, what the mood of the public. But many say the best way to follow politics is to follow the money. So could the Prime Minister be kicked out of office? Who would replace him? Could the Conservatives still win the next general election? How will they do in the local elections? Well, join me in the studio to discuss all this is Matthew Shadrick. He is the head of political markets at Smartrix.
Smarkets, correct?
Smarkets, there you go. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us. First of all, let's just start with political betting, if you like. It's kind of relatively new, isn't it? But it does seem to be growing in terms of people willing to pop a quid or two on political events.
Yeah, it's probably in the UK it's been going for 40 or 50 years.
Oh,
but
really?
In recent years, you're right, it's really taken off. We've seen some huge amounts of money being traded on things like UK general elections, referendums, and especially the US presidential election, which was a kind of record-breaking event.
And where are we at now with the kind of whole Partygate, the situation the Prime Minister finds himself in? Are you guys offering, where is there money flowing around with people making predictions about what might happen?
Yeah, you can bet on the outcome of this motion that Labour are putting forward tomorrow.
Really, that niche?
Yeah,
because that's pretty niche, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's a big event, right?
Yeah.
But the latest odds suggest it's extremely unlikely that Labour will succeed in getting Johnson referred to the Privileges Committee. I think there's only about a 10% chance that could possibly succeed. There don't seem to be enough Tory backbenchers willing to pull the trigger on something like that just now. And overall, the market right now, Smarkets are saying there's about a 1 in 3 chance that Boris Johnson will be evicted from Downing Street at some point this year.
OK, so that's quite high then in large regards. Where do the kind of punters out there, if you like, feel about the standing in the next election, the general election? I know we've got locals coming up as well. If for Labour to win that election would be historic by many ways. They'd have to overturn an 80-seat majority. It'd be a bigger swing than we've seen since 1945. Yeah, are people thinking that's possible?
Yeah, the odds have moved quite a bit in the last couple of months, as you might imagine. So the Tories are still favourites to win most seats, but only just. But the most likely outcome, according to the latest odds, is that Keir Starmer will end up being Prime Minister. Now, as you say, it's very hard for Labour to win a majority, but I think some kind of Labour minority government is now rated as the most likely outcome.
And what about personalities? Do you get to vote in terms of personalities in regards of if the Prime Minister was, and it's a big if, to be kicked out? Who do people reckon might well take over?
Yeah, well, that is a really, really big betting market. It has been for quite a long time now on who will take over as the next Tory leader. And it's really wide open right now because, Rishi Sunak was a very strong favourite up to a couple of months ago. His chances seem to have plummeted. He's only got about a 6% chance now of taking over.
Wow.
He was like at 45% a couple of months ago. And so the field's wide open. That's one of the reasons I think Johnson might be safe, because there's no very obvious alternative. But of the ones we've got, well, Liz Truss is favourite. And behind her, there are people like, Ben Wallace, Defence Secretary. His stock's ridden quite a lot recently. He's second favourite. And we've got people like Jeremy Hunt, who was the runner-up in the election where Boris Johnson was elected back in 2019.
And just very finally, because we've got a big election across the channel in a couple of days' time, what do we think is going to happen in France? Is Macron going to remain in power, or could Le Pen take over?
Well, the betting markets are very, very confident Macron's going to win. About a 90% chance. The polls seem to be moving in his direction. They look like they might be getting closer before the first round, but we're expecting something like a 10-point win for Macron. OK, Matthew, really interesting stuff. As always, I'll be getting some tips after the programme. Matthew Shadrick, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. OK, just to finish up with lots of your views, you've been getting in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Lynn says, why is the First Minister of Scotland not being fined by the police when she admitted she'd made a mistake not wearing a mask inside a barber shop? Parker says it's about time Labour and Lib Dem MPs realise that many people in this country who need homes, and that the 80% of those economic migrants in the Channel under the age of 30. We cannot look after all the people in the world, though, as the Lib Dems were pointing out earlier on. In fact, most people arriving are genuine asylum seekers. And Ian says the Archbishop of Canterbury is entitled to question government policy. He's a member of the House of Lords. The Tories were happy to have an internal inquiry and a Met inquiry, both stretching out the process. Why not the scrutiny committee if they're sure he is innocent? Always do get in touch. Wide range of views, gbviews at gbnews.uk. OK, well, that is it from me for today. Of course, we'll have full coverage of that vote tomorrow and whether the Prime Minister may well be referred to the Privileges Committee. Also, he's on a trip to India. We'll have coverage of that as well. I'm back at 3 tomorrow, Tom at 9:30, Gloria at 12. As always. Up next, though, good friend of mine, good friend of the channel's, Alistair Stewart, standing in for Colin Brazier between 4 and 6. But before all of that, it's balmy outside. Here's the weather this April spring day.
Hello, I'm Luke Mile with your GB News weather forecast. And for the next few days, it's looking mainly dry. There will be some spells of warm sunshine at times, but cooler along those eastern coasts. Now, the reason for that is high pressure still very much in charge of our weather through the rest of Wednesday and into Thursday. But the high does start to drift its way to the north of the UK, so it will allow things to turn a little bit cooler with easterly winds beginning to set in. But through the rest of Wednesday, through Wednesday evening, we'll see plenty of clear skies across the UK. A little bit of fair weather cloud from time to time, but that high pressure keeps those weather fronts away, so it stays dry for the most part. Now, through the course of the night, we will perhaps see a little bit of low cloud drifting in across eastern Scotland. Temperatures here dropping down close to freezing in places, so there could be a touch of frost as well. But for most places, it should just about be frost-free, but it will be a chilly but bright start to Thursday. Now, Thursday itself, another fair day for most places, apart from along some of those North Sea coasts where we will see this low cloud persisting. So for the likes of Newcastle and other coastal areas, we will see temperatures pegged back at just 11 or 12 degrees. But you don't have to come too far inland and further west, and we'll see highs of 17 or 18 degrees. A little bit more cloud, though, through the afternoon for Wales and the southwest of England. Now, more low cloud drifts in from the North Sea through Thursday night and into Friday, and we start to see those easterly winds becoming a little stronger. So by Friday morning, a lot more cloud around, and some of that cloud could just be thick enough to give the odd light spot of rain further south. But our overnight temperatures won't be quite so low, with that blanket of cloud keeping things a little bit warmer. Through Friday then, it's a grey start for some places, but we will see some sunshine through the day. Best of the sunshine likely to be for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland and the north and west of England and Wales. But further south, where we've got more cloud, we could see 1 or 2 spots of rain. And it stays fairly cloudy with the further risk of showers into the weekend across the south. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home.